Shalom, friends. Welcome to this shiur in Talmud. Today, we're studying Masechet Berachot from the Koren Talmud Bavli. This is Tractate Blessings, and we're nearing the end now of chapter 2 of Masechet Berachot. We're on page Tet Zayin Amud Aleph, that's 16a. Ameliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet. My site can be found on www.lovingkindness.co. We had a very exciting section of the Gemara. It deals with a simple Mishnah, but the Gemara is going to go and give us some fascinating details. So stay tuned for perhaps some of the most exciting parts of Shas that we'll see, some beautiful sections of Agadah, of stories, of understanding things on a deeper level, and so on and so forth. Now, our Mishnah that we left off with in our last shiur dealt with the issue of reciting the Kriyat Shema or davening when it comes to a laborer, somebody who is working for a boss, and he happens to be in a tree or he happens to be on top of a wall. And what is the halacha with regards to this person in terms of his obligation to recite the Kriyat Shema or to recite the Shemona Esrei, in terms of whether he should do it where he is or whether he should do it by first coming down from the tree or from the wall? And the Gemara began, and it said, I'll just read the words very quickly. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ha'umanim keirim berosh ha'ilan or berosh hanidbach, that the workers, the laborers, they can read on the tree itself, the top of the tree, or berosh hanidbach, and the top of the wall, or mitpalalim berosh hazayit, and they can also daven on the top of an olive tree, uberosh ha'teina, and the top of a fig tree. Usha'ar kol ha'ilanot, when it comes to other trees, yordim lemata umispalalim. He should descend down, and then he can daven down at the bottom. He shouldn't daven in those other trees, but he may daven in the top of the olive tree and the top of the fig tree. Ubalabait, when it comes to the person who actually owns the trees or he owns the wall, bein kach or bein kach, whichever way we take it, yored lemata, he should come down, mitpalel, and he davens on the ground where everything is stable. He'll be able to concentrate on his tefillah and he won't lose his concentration. Since the truth of the matter is that when a person is davening at the top of a tree, as anybody can understand, he won't be able to really have much kavanah. He'll be worried all the time that the tree is going to break, one of the branches will break, he's going to fall, or even on the wall that he's in the process of building. He's building a particular structure and he's making a wall. It could be that when he stands on this wall, he feels a bit rickety and it might fall down, something like that. He won't be able to concentrate. So therefore, of course, he should come down from the wall. Now we continue from where we left off last week. Ramei lei Rav Mori bara devas Shmuel l'Rava. Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel, raised a contradiction to him, to Rava. Tanan. We learned in a Mishnah, in other words, our Mishnah, Ha'umanim korim berosh ha'ilan uberosh hanidbach, that the laborers may read Kriyat Shema, they say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, at the top of the tree and at the top of this wall. Alma, we see from this, what's the teaching? What can I learn out of it? Lo ba'ei kavanah. It does not require intention, because if a person required intention, how would it be that the Torah would ever allow, why would the Gemara ever allow us to recite the Kriyat Shema or to daven at the top of a tree, if all of these things, of course, required kavanah, intention? Well, a person who finds himself at the top of the tree isn't going to have much intention. He really wants to get back to what he has to do, and he can't really focus on what he's saying because he's worried something will happen. Urimini, and the Gemara raises an objection. What's the objection? Listen to this other teaching. Hakere et Shema, a person who reads the Kriyat Shema, tzarik sheyekaven es libo, he does indeed need to intend his heart. When a person says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, after all, This is exactly what we're learning about in our Gemara. We're studying about the mitzvah of reciting the Kriyat Shema. So when a person recites the Kriyat Shema, didn't we discuss this before? We must have intention when we recite the Kriyat Shema. Shneimar, how do we know that? Because the verse says, I'm going to give you a proof, says the Gemara, Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. What does that mean, listen Israel? Pay attention. Ulahalan hu omer, and later on it also says, Haskeis ushma Yisrael, listen and pay attention, in other words, and listen, O Israel. Ma lahalan v'haskeis, avkan v'haskeis. Just as it is in the first example, meaning the two different verses that we were speaking about, it referred to the idea of listening with intention. You must really pay attention to what you're doing. Therefore, so too over here, where it says the Shema Yisrael in this verse that we're reading, there were two different verses here. The one comes in below over here, as we see on the side in the notes, which is Deuteronomy 27:9, whereas our pasuk Shema Yisrael is a different verse. But since we see over there it says Haskeit u'Shema Yisrael, pay attention and listen Israel, and in our verse it also says Shema Yisrael. Therefore we see that just as it is that a person has to really have intention over there, so too over here he must also have intention. Okay, fine. Before we continue, let us just get some idea of who's who over here. Rav Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel. Very interesting. He was called Rav Mari, and he's known by the name of the son of the daughter of Shmuel, but he's not known by the name of his father. He is Rav Mari, the son of Rachel, a fourth generation Babylonian Amoira, who was a contemporary of Rava. His unconventional appellation is explained by the history of Shmuel's family. And then we can go and take a look at Rashi. He points us there in that direction. We don't have the Rashi on the page here, so I can't take a look at it at this point. The Gemara in Ketubah describes how the daughters of the Amoira Shmuel were taken into captivity. Two of them were brought to Eretz Israel, and one of them, Rachel, was married to a non-Jew who later converted. From then he was called Isur, the convert, and was close to the Torah luminaries in Babylonia. Although he was born after his father converted, Rav Mari is generally mentioned without a patronymic because she was from a very prestigious family. There are several instances where sages were called by the names of their famous mothers who were from prestigious families, even when their father's identity cast no aspersion on their lineage. Rav Mari was apparently wealthy and engaged in commerce. However, he was also a significant Torah scholar and was appointed to a lofty position on the court in Babylonia. Rav Mari had three sons, all of whom were Torah scholars: Rav Achasava Marzutra and Rava bar Rav Mari. Fine. So here's the story that we've got so far, and we have a contradiction. Ishtik. So Rava was silent. He didn't have a response to this whole idea. Well, what should we do about it? On the one hand, we're learning that he can recite the Kriyat Shema on the top of the tree. On the other hand, we're learning, but you're required to have kavanah when you recite the Kriyat Shema, at least when you say the first sentence, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Amalei, so he said to him, Midei Shmi Alach Baha, did you hear anything on this matter? Is there something that you might have heard that will help us understand it in greater detail? Amalei, he said to him, Haki Amar Rav Sheshes. So said Rav Sheshes. V'hu shebeteilin mimelachtan v'korin. This is an instance where, in any case, a person is going to be mevatel, which means he will stop working and then he's going to read. So therefore, if he's going to stop working, then of course he can read the Kriyat Shema with kavanah. See the halacha here. It says, even laborers must stop working to recite the first paragraph of Shema, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Sheshes, which means to say that he would stop working in any case, and therefore he would be able to have kavanah. V'hatanya, and wasn't it taught in a Braita? Beis Hillel Omrim, Beis Hillel say, Oiskim b'melachtan v'korin. No, they can occupy themselves with their work and they can read as they go along. In other words, they can do what they have to do while they're in the process of reciting the Kriyat Shema. Lo kashya. The Gemara answers and says, this is not difficult to understand. There's no difficulty. Habe perek rishon, habe perek sheni. The first teaching that spoke about the idea of stopping and then only afterwards reciting the Kriyat Shema and then going back to work and having kavanah referred to the first perek. The perek sheni, this that Beis Hillel is teaching is referring to the second paragraph, where already it's not as important if he has that kavanah. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, the rabbis taught us in a tosefta, hapoalim shahayu osim melacha etzel balabayit. There were some workers, and they happened to have been doing some work by the homeowner. Koren Kriyat Shema, they recite the Kriyat Shema, umevarechin lefaneha, and they bless before, ula'achareha, and afterwards. This is, of course, referring to the fact that people are working and they have to eat. So before they eat, they must make a blessing before they eat. Here we're referring to, they're reciting we're talking about the Shema still. They're reciting the blessings before the Shema and they're making the bracha after the Shema. For oiklin pitan, then they're going to eat their bread, and they're going to make a blessing on the bread before and a blessing afterwards. Umispalelin tefillah shel Shmona Esrei, and then afterwards they daven the prayer of the Shmona Esrei. Aval ein yordim lifnei hateva, but according to what the rabbis taught in this Tosefta, they do not descend in order to go and daven in front of the ark, which means to say as a shaliach tzibur. Ve'ein nosin kapeihin, and these laborers should also not lift up their hands in prayer, referring to the fact if they happen to be kohanim and they have to bless the community, they do not take a part in these particular things. Once again, because they are working, and while they're engaged in their work, they have to continue the work that they're doing, and they are responsible for what they need to do. They cannot take off time just because there is time for prayer, because they are earning a particular wage for the work that they're doing. V'hatanya, and wasn't it taught in a brisa contradiction? Me'ein Shmona Esrei. Elsewhere, it says that in this situation, the laborers only need to pray an abbreviated Shmona Esrei. They do not need to pray a full Shmona Esrei. They can pray even an abbreviated Shmona Esrei. Omar Rav Sheshes said, look, Kasha, it's not difficult. Why? In the one instance, it's talking about an abbreviated Shmona Esrei. In another instance, it's talking about a full Shmona Esrei. Well, which one is it? There is no contradiction. Rabban Gamliel, the first opinion that we're reading about is Rabban Gamliel, and he says we should recite the full Shmona Esrei. Rabbi Yeshua, the other opinion, is in accordance with Rabbi Yeshua, and he says we can do an abbreviated Shmona Esrei because this particular fellow is working, and therefore he needs to get back to his work as soon as possible. And although he has an obligation to serve Hashem and to recite the Shmona Esrei, he can get away with an abbreviated Shmona Esrei. Let's take a look over here at this halacha. The laborers recite the Shema, pray and eat. Laborers who are paid a salary recite an abridged Amidah prayer and grace after meals. Today, all laborers recite the entire grace after meals as they are hired on that basis. So in other words, in today's times, the general idea is certainly if a person is engaged in a business, he's working for a Jewish boss, then the chances are, as long as this boss, of course, is understanding of the principle of this Jew observing the mitzvot, he will understand well that this person needs to take off a little bit of time in order to do his benching, etc., etc. But of course, he would have a lunch break. In any case, he would be able to do it. And we hope that the boss would be understanding of these things. And of course, if not, this fellow will find himself in a difficult situation, because if the boss catches him busy praying and benching and doing all sorts of things, he'll say, what am I paying you for? Which makes for a very uncomfortable situation. Let us continue. Rabbi Yeshua, hold on a second, says the Gemara. If we're speaking about Rabbi Yeshua, my area poalim, what difference does it make? What are we concerned with regards to laborers? Afilu kol adam nami. Actually, everybody can also pray the abbreviated Shemona Esrei. Once we speak about the idea of Shemona Esrei, abbreviated Shemona Esrei, and Rabbi Yeshua is already telling us that a person can daven an abbreviated Shemona Esrei, well, maybe then we can say that anybody could daven an abbreviated Shemona Esrei, and that, of course, doesn't seem to make any sense. Ella, but rather, Idi ve'idi, both opinions are Rabban Gamliel. Both opinions are Rabban Gamliel. The one that says the abbreviated Shemona Esrei and the ordinary Shemona Esrei, both of them are in accordance with Rabban Gamliel. V'lo kasha, and there's no difficulty. Kan, here we're referring to a case, ba'osin biskaran, when a person is paid money for the job that he's doing. Kan, and in the other case, ba'osin bisu'udasan, when he's doing it for his meal, which means to say, if the person is doing it for money, he's getting paid per hour in order to achieve a certain goal for the boss, then he would not be entitled to take off the time to pray a full Shemona Esrei. However, if he is working that day only for a meal, as I guess some bosses might employ a person and say, look, you're going to work for me the whole day, and what you're going to get for that is 2 meals during the day, and that is your payment that you will receive for the work. Under those circumstances, he may certainly daven the full Shemona Esrei, and of course he may do the full benching and so on and so forth, because he is only being paid for his meal. That's all he's receiving. That's his payment. Vatanya, and wasn't it taught in a brighter question? Hapualim shayu oisim melacha etzel baal. The workers that are doing their work by the master, by the homeowner, balabayit, koirin kriyat shema, umit palalim, they can daven the kriyat shema, and they also daven the Shemona Esrei, v'oichlin pitan, and they eat their bread. In other words, this is another brighter. This is another teaching somewhere that is being codified in the Gemara to contrast the other teachings. V'oichlin pitan, and they eat their bread, v'ein mevarachim lefaneha, and they don't make a blessing before eating the bread. Aval mevarachim le'achareya shtayim, but they do make a blessing after they eat the bread. They recite 2 blessings. And we know, of course, that we don't recite 2 blessings. We recite 3 blessings, 4 blessings. In our Birkat Hamazon, 4 blessings, at least 3 blessings, if nothing else. Well, according to the Gemara, they only recite 2 blessings. Keitzad, how does that work? What are they going to do? Bracha Rishona Ketikuna, the first blessing, they're going to recite as they should. Hazan Esaolam Kulo B'tuvo, etc., etc. Shniya, the second blessing that they're going to recite. Poseyach bebirkas haaretz, it begins with the blessing on the land, as we usually speak about. V'kolelin bonei Yerushalayim bibracha haaretz, bebirkas haaretz, and it includes the bonei Yerushalayim in the bracha on the land, which means to say that within the second blessing we include the third blessing also, and that is the correct way to do it. The Gemara asked the question: when do we say all of this? Once again, when he does the work for the sake of his income that he's going to receive, the salary that he'll receive for the work that he has been employed to do, for the hours of work that he has to do. But if a person is working for the sake of a meal, working so that they get paid in the form of food, or shahaya balabayit may save imahim, or if the balabayit, the homeowner, happens to be eating together with them, he's reclining together with them, then one blesses, they all should bless in accordance with the standard formula, which means to say, if they are with the balabayit, it's understandable that he knows the circumstances, he himself is going to be doing benching, and so therefore they are entitled to bench completely together with the balabayit. Or obviously, if they are working for their seudah and they are not working for money for the work that they do, then likewise they can do the entire benching. Chatan patur mikriyat shema. We continue. We learned before that the chatan, a groom, is exempt from reciting the kriyat shema. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a Braita, B'shivtecha b'veisecha, in your sitting down in your home. There's a mitzvah to recite the Kriyat Shema, B'shivtecha b'veisecha. This is how we're going to recite it. When you're settled, when you're sitting down in your house. What does that mean? Prat le'osek b'mitzvah. This excludes the case of a person who is occupied within a mitzvah. He is busy doing a mitzvah, and therefore he does not have to recite the Kriyat Shema. Ubelechtecha v'derech. And what do these words, ubelechtecha v'derech, come to teach us? And in your walking along the way, prat lechatan, comes to exclude the chatan. This is what the rabbis taught in a Braita. They said that the fact that the words say b'shivtecha b'veisecha comes to teach us that everybody should recite the Kriyat Shema, with the exception of a person who's occupied in a mitzvah. The fact that it says uvelechtecha v'derech, and in your going along the way, is coming to exempt the case of the chatan, of the groom, who is exempt. Mikan amru, from here they learnt, from here they said, hakoines es abesula, somebody who marries a virgin, patur, he is exempt from the Kriyat Shema. It means he enters, hakoines, he enters with her, meaning to say that he marries her, he is exempt from the Kriyat Shema. Ve'es ha'almona chayav. But according to this teacher in the Braita, it says that if he marries a widow, then he is still obligated to recite the Kriyat Shema. If he marries a virgin, then he is exempt from reciting the Kriyat Shema. If he marries a widow, he is still obligated to recite the Kriyat Shema. Ma mashma, how is this implied? From where do we learn all of this? The Gemara asks, meaning, how did you learn this all out? When you walk along the way, this is that teaching us that a groom is exempt from the obligation to recite the Kriyat Shema. Omar Rav Papa said, Ki derech, from the word derech, ma derech reshus, just as it is that a person can go on a path as a voluntary thing, derech, it says there, when you go along the way. When do you go along a way? You can choose. If you wish to go, you go. If you don't wish to go, you don't go. It's a reshus. It's voluntary. Af haka nami, so too over here, reshus. We refer to voluntary things. When it comes to voluntary things, you must, of course, recite the Kriyat Shema. When it comes to things of the nature, such as the Chatan, who has mitzvahs to perform at this point in time, then, of course, one must indeed, while he's, of course, exempt, because he is involved in a mitzvah, he's exempt from reciting the Kriyat Shema. Mi lo askinan. The Gemara asks a question. Are we not occupied? The ka'azel lidvar mitzvah, with the case of where he is going along the way to perform a mitzvah, meaning to say, uvelechtecha vaderech, and in your going on the journey, wherever you happen to be going to perform a mitzvah. Va'afilu haki, even so, when you go to perform the mitzvah, omar rachamana, the Torah said, likri, to read the Kriyat Shema, which means to say, according to this last teaching, that the words uvelechtecha vaderech are coming to say to us, even when you go along the path to perform a mitzvah, you must still recite the Kriyat Shema. Imkain, if so, leimakra belechet. Then the verse should have said in going, not belechtecha vaderech, belechet, in going along the way. My belechtecha. What does it mean when it says in your going? Shma mina, we learn from this. Belechet didach, when it comes to your own personal voluntary going, hu demechayaft, that is when the obligation applies and a person must recite the Kriyat Shema. Had the mitzvah, however, if it is a mitzvah that you are going for, petirat, you are exempt. That is what this teaching is coming to teach us at the end of the day. We progress to page Tet Zayin Amud Base. This is 16b. Ihachi, if so, my area, what are we concerned with here? How do we get it out? Hakoines es abesula. then when we speak about the case of somebody who's marrying a virgin, even a person who marries a widow is also obligated to recite the Kriyat Shema, because after all, what practical difference does it make? If he is involved in a mitzvah, he is involved in a mitzvah. And in both cases, he is involved in the mitzvah of marriage. He is getting married. Answers the Gemara, the reason why he is exempt when he marries the virgin and he is still obligated when he marries the widow is hachatrid. In this case, he is burdened, worried, concerned, v'hachalotarid. And in this case, he is not so burdened. He's not so bothered. Which means to say, at this point in time, when this man marries the virgin, he is preoccupied in his thoughts with regards to the mitzvah that he's about to perform. Whereas if he marries the widow, he is less concerned with the acts that will be done later that evening. For whatever reason, we could come up with many reasons as to what he might be preoccupied with. Those who know the halachot, for example, that deal with family purity, the laws of Nida, know well that the halachot in particular for a virgin are a lot more detailed because of the blood that comes about and so on and so forth. And he might be also very worried about all the different concerns of fulfilling this mitzvah in the correct way, to make sure he does not do things which are against halacha, and to know exactly what is happening as well. There's a lot to understand, that especially that happens on that first night when a man marries a virgin woman, as opposed to if he's going to marry a woman who is a widow, who already she doesn't have the problem of the hymen and the additional blood of the basulim, the dam basulim, the blood of the virginity, etc., etc. There could be many reasons why he's burdened. And of course, certainly if this is his first time, being married, and he's going to be concerned about how things will follow during the night, because he's concerned with the whole event that's happening, he can't concentrate altogether on the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema, and therefore he is exempt. Whereas because he marries the widow, he is less inclined to feel that same tension or disruption or question as to whether or not he feels uncomfortable with the situation. Perhaps he feels a little bit easier with the situation that evening. We could think about it, we could discuss it, we could question it. Why indeed is he more burdened with the basula than he is with the almona? Imishum tirda, the Gemara continues, if it is on account of burden, being burdened down, he's preoccupied. Afilu tavas sefinato bayam nami, even if a person's ship is sinking in the sea, then also he could be exempt. In other words, if we speak about the idea of a person being burdened by something, and therefore he is exempt from reciting the Kriyat Shema, what about a person who hears news? He hears the news that his ship is sinking, and all of a sudden he starts thinking to himself, oh, I've lost all that shipment that's supposed to be coming through, all the merchandise that's coming through, it's all gone. What am I going to do now? And he's burdened and preoccupied with his thoughts about his merchandise. Therefore, maybe he should be exempt also. Alama Omar Rabbi Abba bar Zavda Omar Rav. So why did Rabbi Abba, the son of Zavda, say that Rav said, Avel Chayev Bechol Mitzvahs? So then, look what he said here. A mourner is obligated in all mitzvahs, ha'amuras b'Torah, which are said over in the Torah, which are mentioned in the Torah, chutz min hatfilin, with the exception of tefillin. That means to say, we're talking about the first day of mourning, somebody dies, and he has not yet put on his tefillin. Well, in that case, he may not put tefillin on that day. Sheharei ne'emar bahen, because it says about them, pe'er, that they are splendor. Shene'emar, because it says, pe'ercha chavush alecha v'goimer. Your splendor is bind your splendor upon you. If even a mourner who is pained and preoccupied is obligated to recite Shema, clearly preoccupation has no bearing upon one's obligation, which means to say that we see even with regards to the mourner, the only thing that the mourner is really exempt from is the tefillin, but everything else he is obligated to. So therefore, we see certainly when it comes to the fellow who his ship sank, so then of course he would be obligated to recite the Kriyat Shema. Omri, the answer of the Gemara is as follows. They say, Hatam tirda Berachot. This one is always speaking about is a preoccupation which is voluntary. Hacha tirda the mitzvah. And in this one, we're speaking about the case of a preoccupation that relates to a mitzvah, which means to say, if the preoccupation is of a general nature, one is certainly not exempt from Kriyat Shema, and one must recite the Kriyat Shema. When the preoccupation has to do with a voluntary thing, he is exempt. When it is a mitzvah thing, a voluntary thing, then of course he is obligated. When it is a mitzvah matter, he is exempt. The Mishnah continues, a new Mishnah. Rachatz laila harishon shemesa ishto. Rabban Gamliel, we hear a story. This is a piece of Agadah, a piece of the stories of the Gemara, and says the following. Rachatz laila harishon shemesa ishto. Rabban Gamliel washed himself on the first night that his wife died. His wife died, and yet, although we know the halachot are that when one is a mourner, one may not wash for a certain period of time, yet Rabban Gamliel washed himself on the very first night that his wife died. Amru Talmidav, his students heard about it. His students knew that he'd gone to the bathhouse and he had washed himself. So they said to him, Limadatanu Rabbeinu, didn't our teacher, you, didn't you teach us she'avel asur lichotz, that a mourner is forbidden to wash himself? Omar lahim, he said to them, Eini k'sha'ar b'nei adam, I am not like other people. Istnis ani, I am delicate. Istnis, I'm a delicate person. Here we see already a whole area of halakha opening up in front of our eyes of how different people are, and how it is that very often we need to know what type of halakha to apply to a particular person relative to the situation that they're in. Now we know in general terms, as we're going to read here in a moment, that a mourner is prohibited to bathe. And therefore, why was it that Rabban Gamliel behaved in this way as a great rabbi and teacher amongst the Jewish people? He for sure knew that his students were going to take note and see that he bathed, and you can't be hypocritical. On the one hand, off he goes and he tells his students in the shiur, when you are a mourner, he says, don't bathe. On the other hand, when he himself becomes the mourner, what's the first thing that he goes and he does? He goes and he has a nice bath. So what's going on here? Rabban Gamliel says, but you see, I'm different. My nature is so delicate that if I don't bath, I'm going to feel such discomfort, such unpleasantness that I cannot even take it. It is so irritating to me. It disturbs me so much that I simply have to do it. Don't think that I'm bathing for pleasure as such. I am bathing because the frustration, the feeling of discomfort is so great upon me that if I don't bathe, I cannot take it. I cannot tolerate it. This in the Gemara is defined by the term of istnis. He is very delicate. There are certain people in the world, I'm sure that you can identify with this, if not yourself, perhaps you have a relative or a friend, and you know that such people are very delicate people. They're very squeamish people. If they put their hands, for example, into the soil for just a moment, and the hand gets a little bit of soil on it, they feel dreadful. They've got to immediately sanitize themselves, put on alcohol, clean their hands. They feel disgusted. And whatever it is, even if it's a small amount, it disturbs them tremendously. And small things can disturb them and irritate them. Whereas for other people, for example, if a person is a surgeon and he has to open up a person's body, he's an emergency surgeon, whether he opens up the chest area, whether he opens up the leg area and there's blood and gore and whatever it is, nevertheless, as a surgeon, he doesn't feel any irritation by it. It doesn't bother him. The blood might be going all over his gloves and all over the room. It might be spilling out of the person's body. It doesn't bother him in the least. He is used to it. And this is part of his work that he's involved in, and he's used to it. Obviously, if he cannot take blood, he cannot take the sight of the blood, he cannot deal with it, he's not going to find becoming a doctor an easy profession, certainly not to become an emergency surgeon. So, of course, we're talking about Rabban Gamliel, and he was one of these people who was not going to make it to become an emergency surgeon. He was an isnis. Now, the halacha is that a mourner is prohibited to wash his entire body, as opposed to washing it incrementally during the 7 days of mourning. As we learned in the Mishnah, today the practice is to refrain from bathing for 30 days, and one should not deviate from this custom, as it is an ancient practice established by Vatikin. And so is the halakha for those who are interested to know that when a relative passes away, that we do not bath for a period of 30 days from the time of the burial. Delicate isnis. The sages said elsewhere that not every sensitive person is permitted to bath or bathe when in mourning, only those who truly suffer. Some say only one who becomes physically ill from failure to bathe may do so when in mourning. So, of course, there are leniencies available. One needs to ask a halakhic authority at the time what to do. If a person really is an istanis, and he feels this discomfort that it's just so too terrible for him, he needs to ask a shayla as to what to do. If he's not in that category and it just simply feels uncomfortable, well, that is exactly what it's all about. That the feeling of the mourning is supposed to have this an effect on one, that one feels a sense of discomfort. One is not supposed to feel happy and excited. And by not bathing or bathing, what happens to us is we feel a sense of discomfort, which is the process of what the mourning period is all about. It was like, I once asked a rabbi, when it comes to fasting, what should I eat so that I don't feel any difficulty with the fasting? What should I eat before? In other words, let me eat certain foods and then the fasting will go easy. And the answer that he explained to me is that at the end of the day, the fasting is not supposed to be an easy thing, really, because at the end of the day, that's what the fast is. There is a certain measure of discomfort. And therefore, no matter what we eat the day before or the morning before, if it's a day fast or whatever it is, it still comes to certain times of the day that we feel a bit of tension and discomfort. Well, that is what the fast is. The fast brings upon us discomfort. If the whole idea was that we shouldn't feel anything through fasting, and we could magically take something that made us feel no pain whatsoever, then of course the fast wouldn't fulfill its purpose of making us feel a little bit weaker because we need to do teshuvah. In other words, the mitzvahs are there to accommodate what the situation is. We do not bath at this period in time, not because we want to walk around as dirty people, but in order to enhance or detract, whichever way we're looking at it, enhance the concept of what the mourning is about. We may not bathe, we may not bath, we may not clean our bodies because we are engaging in a process of mourning. It is affecting us. However, if it affects us to such a great degree that we cannot even get on, we cannot sleep, we feel so irritated, we must ask a shayla to know to what degree we would be allowed to bathe, wash ourselves, cold water on each individual part of the body, hot water, warm water, the whole body, and so on and so forth. Language, isnis, from the Greek, and then he writes here what the Greek is. Unfortunately, I don't know how to read Greek, but here it says asthenis, if that's the pronunciation, meaning weak or sickly. So Rabban Gamliel, meanwhile, has washed himself. Next part of the Mishnah. Ukashemeis tovi avdo, when his servant Tovi, Rabban Gamliel had a very great servant who served him, and he was very close to the servant. People in this type of situation might well be able to identify where a person can hire somebody, even a non-Jew, in other words, hire a non-Jew to work for one. He is the chauffeur, and he is the person who takes care of one's home, and he is the person that takes care of so many things that after a while one becomes so close to this person, it's almost like you feel such a close relationship. It doesn't make a difference. The person's Jewish, he's not Jewish, whatever the case may be. Now, Tovi was his servant, and Kibel alav tanchumim. Turns out that when Tovi, his servant, died, he accepted upon himself comfort, as a mourner would accept comfort from people who would come by and say, we're really sorry about this whole situation that you've lost your loved one, and so on and so forth, so to speak. He's sitting shiva. What is he doing? Right? He's accepting tanchumim. He's accepting condolences. Amru lo talmidav. His students said to him, Limadatanu Rabbeinu. But didn't our teacher teach us? This is the same Rabban Gamliel, who seems to be quite hypocritical. He seems to be teaching his students one thing and behaving in another way altogether. That we do not accept condolences for avadim, for the servants, for the slaves. He's a slave. He's not like you and I. He's not your family. And therefore, what are you accepting tanchumim for? Omalahim, he said to them, Ein tovi avdi kishe'ar kol ha'avadim. Tovi, my servant, is not like other servants. Kasher haya. He was kosher, which means to say he was virtuous. And it is appropriate to accord him the same respect accorded to a family member. It's a very interesting statement that he says. Let's just see here. Tovi, the slave, Tavi, the slave of Rabban Gamliel, is the most famous slave in the Talmud. Some go so far as to draw a parallel between Tavi, the slave of Rabban Gamliel, and Eliezer, the slave of Abraham. Rabban Gamliel was very fond of Tavi and appreciated his character and Torah knowledge. The Gemara relates that when Rabban Gamliel thought he had discovered a way to free Tavi, and he was overjoyed. Ultimately, though, he did not free him due to a concern over the prohibition to free a slave. Despite this, Rabban Gamliel treated him as a member of his family, and therefore he accepted condolences when Tavi died. The sages said about Tavi, there were many who were worthy to be ordained like Tavi, the slave of Rabban Gamliel, due to their lineage. They did not achieve that status. Note that when his slave Tavi died, he accepted condolences for him. This does not contradict the principle that one does not accept condolences for slaves, as they commented in the Jerusalem Talmud. From here we see that a student is beloved like a son. A virtuous slave who was a student like Tavi is beloved like a son, and therefore one may accept condolences for his death. So let's carry on. Katan, let's just read the end of the Mishnah before we continue. Katan, a groom, Im rotze likrot kriyat Shema laila harishon korei. At the end of the day, if a groom wishes to recite the kriyat Shema on the evening of the first night when he marries, he may do so. He may read. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Lo kol harotze litol et Hashem yitol. Not everybody has the right to do and accept upon himself as if he has such a reputation that he's so kosher, so to speak, that he's allowed to do it. Remember, we're talking in those days where we presumed the opposite. We presumed that a person has great kavanah when he davens kriyat Shema. Therefore, when he marries, he must be dafka not to recite the kriyat Shema on the first night he marries, because we say he can't have kavanah. However, in today's time, since most people in any case don't have kavanah, the halacha is that everybody must say the kriyat Shema. And the opposite, if he doesn't say the kriyat Shema because he wants to show how kosher he is doing exactly the opposite. Now, this is the case over here. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was saying, not everybody who wishes to assume the reputation of a God-fearing person may assume it, because in those days, everybody would recite the kriyat Shema with kavanah, or would feel that if they were to miss out on reciting kriyat Shema, it would be a really big deal to them. And therefore, they would not recite the kriyat Shema on the first night of the wedding, of the marriage. However, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is teaching us, and consequently, not everyone who wishes to recite Shema on his wedding night may do so. The Gemara begins. The halakha. If a groom wishes to recite Shema the first night, a groom who wishes to recite Shema on his wedding night may not do so, because it appears presumptuous, in accordance with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Today, however, all grooms recite it, and on the contrary, failure to recite it appears presumptuous, as we just said. The Gemara begins the discussion on this Mishnah. My timer, the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, or Rabban Gamliel, whoever we're talking about. We're talking about Rabban Gamliel. What is the reason that Rabban Gamliel bathed on the first night when his wife died? Kasavar, because he held Aninus Laila de Rabbanan, that the whole idea of mourning in the evening is only a rabbinical infraction. Tiksiv, because it's written, Va'akarisa kayom mar, and it says there, and the end will be like a bitter day. Implication, the day is bitter, but not the night. Uvimkom isnis, and in the place where we speak about a delicate person, lo gazru be rabbanan, the rabbis did not decree that this applied to him, and therefore he's entitled to have a bath, to bathe. Let's just take a look at this whole verse. And I will turn your feasts into mourning and all your songs into lamentations. I will bring sackcloth upon your loins and baldness upon every head. And I will make you like a mourner for an only child. And the end will be like a bitter day. Therefore, by Torah law, one's acute mourning is only during the day, like a bitter day, while the acute mourning at night that follows is only rabbinic. Tovi Avdor, and when Tavi, his servant, died, Tan Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a Braita, Avadim u'shfachot, when we speak about slaves and maidservants, Ein omdim aleihim b'shura, one does not stand up for them in a row. Many people know the custom at the funeral, for example, is that after the person is buried, that they form a line so that people can, the mourners can pass through the line and they can be comforted by those who are standing in the line. Here, however, for the Avadim and the Shvachot, we do not stand in a line to comfort the mourners, which is ridiculous because this is not family. And we do not recite for them the blessing of the mourners, nor the comforting, the consolation of the mourners. The Gemara continues with a story. Maisa, a story happens, a piece of Agadah in the Gemara. Don't forget, the Gemara consists of the Halacha, the law, and the Agadah, the stories. Now we're going to hear a story that will help us understand more about how to put this into practice. Umeisa shivchatosha Rabbi Eliezer, that the maidservant of Rabbi Eliezer died. Niknasu talmidav l'nachamo. So his students entered to offer consolation to him. Kevan shira'a otam, since he saw them, meaning to say he realized that they were coming to comfort him, and he knew well the halacha that we don't accept comfort for the shivcha. Alala aliyah, he went upwards to the aliyah, to the chamber above. Va'alu acharav, and guess what? The students followed him. Niknas la'anpilon. So then he entered into this place called the Anpilon, translated here as the gatehouse. And guess what? Niknasu acharav. The students followed after him. Now, what's going on in the story? He keeps running away from the students to tell them there is no need to comfort me for the loss of a maidservant. And what did they say? No, we're coming to comfort you in any case. So he keeps running away. Niknas latraklin. He entered into the banquet hall. Niknasu acharav. And they followed him. Omar lahim, he said to them, Kimedume, it seems to me, from this whole story taking place, he says to his students, Kimedume ani, it seems to me, she'atem nichvim b'poshrim, that you, I thought, in other words, it seems to me that you would have been burnt through lukewarm water, which means you should have got the hint. The moment I left, when you entered, you should have already realized that I was rebuking you by telling you, please don't follow me. Akshav, however, now, still now, you have not yet been burnt, you haven't been scorched in the hottest possible waters around, which means I moved to another level, you followed me. I moved again, you followed me again. And we're in the hottest waters possible, and yet you're still not burning. You should have been burnt already. You should have got the hint already. You should have already known what's the halakha. By the time I ran away from you the first time, you should have picked up the hint and realized not to follow me. Yet you followed me all this way. Lo kach shaniti lachem. Did I not teach you already? Said Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says to his students, didn't I already teach you? Avadim u'shvachot, regarding servants and maidservants, or slaves and maidservants, ein omdim aleihem b'shura. We do not stand for them in a row. Ve'ein omrim aleihem birkas avelim. And we also do not do the traditional blessing of mourners. V'lo tanchumei avelim. And also we don't do the consolation for the mourners. Ella, but rather, ma omrim aleihem. What do we say about them? We say like this. In other words, if a person, God forbid, is losing somebody who's very close to them, but the person is not a relative, doesn't fit into the category of the 7 relatives who we must mourn for, and so on and so forth. We're not speaking about these categories. Keshem she'omrim lo la'adam, just as we say to a person, al shoro va'al chamoro shemaisu, even if a person loses an ox or a donkey that dies, we say something to him. In other words, we don't want to compare this person who died to the ox or the donkey, but we want to say the following points. We want to say that the category of the person doesn't fit into the category of close relative, for whom we must mourn in accordance with the rules of halakha. But the person did lose somebody that was close to him, and therefore there is some sort of a relationship. And therefore, we can say something to this person to acknowledge the difficulty. Is there something wrong with acknowledging the difficulty of another person because they lost something that was precious to them, just because that thing that they lost doesn't seem to have any full connection in the fullest sense of the word? Absolutely not. So what do we say? Hamakom yimalei lecha chesroncha. May the omnipresent, may God fill up for you your lack. May Hashem comfort you. Basically, is what we're saying in a different type of expression. May Hashem help you through this process. So too should we say to a person who has lost his slave, his servant, his best friends, whatever this is, in this non-Jewish case that we're speaking about here, and about his maidservant, may the omnipresent, may God fill for you your lack. You have lost something in life, and we pray that God will fill up that loss that you are going through now. He will help you through the process. The Torah is sensitive. The Torah is not coming to tell us something negative, even if somebody might want to read those words and take something negative out of it, and the comparison sounds just to be a certain type of negative comparison. This is not true, but rather we are learning it in the positive sense. There is a certain lack in a person has a connection with a human or anything else that he has a connection with. We offer comfort to the person and we say to him, may Hashem help you through this process. May Hashem comfort you, but not in the traditional sense, not in the sense that we do it in the sense of a relative. Now, we got up to here in the notes that you said here, the notes, his students entered to console him, and then he went afterwards and he left to the different rooms. He knew that they were coming to console him and not to say, may the omnipresent replenish your loss, because they entered in the manner of those coming to console a mourner. He knew that they were coming in order to console him in the fullest sense of the word. He'd be sitting down and they would offer the traditional words of comfort, as is the custom to a person who has lost a close relative. Okay? If a groom wishes to recite the Shema on the first night we read, for slaves and maidservants, one does not stand in a row. One neither stands in a row to console, nor does one recite the consolation of mourners to the masters of slaves and maidservants who died. Instead, one says to him, may the omnipresent replenish your loss as he would had his ox or donkey died. Take a look at this language that we've been learning over here. The anpilon is the gatehouse, apparently from the Greek, meaning an anteroom or a small room built around a gate used as a corridor. There are a variety of languages that are included within the Gemara, other than the fact that it is majority Aramaic, and there are, of course, some Hebrew words. There are also some Greek words, and there are other words as well. So for those of us, because of course the Gemara was written at a time when the Jewish people were in exile, and they found themselves amongst many nations, and certain words crept in, and those words were used to describe these particular things. And hence we see that this was the Greek language creeping in to into the Jewish world. A banquet hall, the traklin, from this Greek word over here, this refers to a room with 3 divans. However, its meaning has been expanded to include any large room where guests are hosted. Tanya idach. There's another teaching. Avadim ushfachot. With regards to slaves, servants, and maidservants. Ein maspidin otam. We do not eulogize them. Rabbi Yosei Omer, Rabbi Yosei says, Im evet kasherhu, if he was a good guy, he was a kosher servant, then omrim alav, we say about him, hoi, ish tov v'ne'eman v'nehene miyegio. Whoa, he was such a good man, so faithful, and he enjoyed the toil of his hands, which means to say, the toil, he enjoyed his own toil, which means to say that he was involved in his own work. He was a good man, he achieved things, and we praise the fact that we have lost this great man. Amrulo, they said to him, in Cain, if that's the case, that we're going to eulogize the avadim and the shvachot in this particular way, in Cain, mahi nachta lakshairim. What have you left over for those who are really kosher, which means the Jewish person who really needs to have the eulogy about him? What words will you say about him? The same words? That means that you're giving the same qualification. You're equating the two of them. And according to the Gemara here, we should be careful to eulogize this Jewish person in an even greater manner, if possible. But if you've used these great words already for the avadim and the shvachot, what have you left over for the Jewish person? Tanu Rabbanan. Now, the Gemara is going to go on to a new section here. So we're going to stop because at this point in time, it's going on to, again, another exciting section. But since we're going to be leaving off and we're going to be in the middle of it, we're going to pause and stop at this point in time. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Sher from Chesed Ve'emet, and my site can be found at www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed this shiur, I'd really appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up by clicking on the like button below. Of course, subscribe to my channel and make a comment if you wish to. If you'd like to be in touch with me via my site, please feel free to just go to the site and send me an email about any topic in Torah, mitzvahs, growth, life, whatever you'd like to talk about. I'd be very happy to respond and we can be in touch. I look forward to another shiur, and I hope that we will be in touch in the near future. And I wish you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.